Good morning, vinyl community. I'm here to read out Poisoner in Chief. We're in this chapter. An effort to tamper with his project, MK Ultra, is not permitted. This story goes into Whitey Bulger. He was a victim of the MK Ultra project. We're going to talk about him a little bit in this chapter. How much LSD can a human being take? Gottlieb wanted to know. Could there be a breaking point, he wondered? A dose so massive that it would shatter the mind and blast away consciousness, leaving a void into which new impulses or even a new personality could be implanted? Finding the matter would require intensive experiments. Soon after the launching MK Ultra, Gottlieb found a physician to conduct them. Harris Isabel, director of research at the Addiction Research Center in Lexington, Kentucky. Officially, this center was a hospital, but it functioned more like a prison. The Bureau of Prisoners co-administered it with the Public Health Service. Most inmates were African Americans from the margins of society. They were unlikely to complain if abused. That made the fine subjects for clandestine drug experiments. Isbell had conducted true serum experiments for the Office of Naval Research and was curious about LSD. In his small world, the CIA's interest in LSD was an open secret. Early in 1953, he wrote to ask if the agency could supply him with a reasonably large quantity of the drug for a study of the mental and other pharmacological effects produced by the chronic administration of the diethylamide of lysergic acid, LSD. The request caught Gottlieb's attention. Isbell combined a fervent interest in psychoactive drugs with a ready supply of prisoners and a willingness to use them as research subjects. This made him an ideal MK Ultra contractor. On July 53, Gottlieb visited him in Lexington. They struck a deal. Gottlieb would provide LSD and whatever funds necessary. Isbell would design and conduct experiments, provide subjects, and file reports. Carefully observing bureaucratic protocol, Gottlieb cleared this deal with Isbell's superiors. He later wrote that he informed them in a secure manner of our interest in and support for the research program of Dr. Harris Isbell and our financial support of it. He gave them no details of the research program. He asked for none. As soon as Dr. William Sebrill, director of the National Institute of Health, understood that this was a CIA project, Gottlieb wrote in his report, he approved highly of our general aims and indicated that he would afford us full support and protection. The deal was pretty simple, one investigator later wrote. The CIA needed a place to test dangerous drugs and possibly addictive drugs. Isbell had a large number of drug users in no position to complain. From the early 1950s onward, the agency shipped LSD with any number of other potentially dangerous narcotics to Kentucky to be tested on human guinea pigs. Isbell's MK Ultra conducts subproject 73 to test whether LSD, mescaline, and other drugs could make users more susceptible to hypnosis. Subproject 91 to perform preclinical pharmacological studies required to develop new psychochemicals, and in subproject 147 to study photomimetic drugs, a class that produces delusions and delirium. He went on to write and co-author more than 100 scientific articles, many of them reporting the results of drug experiments. In these articles, he refers to his inmate subjects as volunteers. The degree of their informed consent, however, is highly debatable. They were not told what sort of drug they would be fed or what its effects might be. To affect them, Isbell offered rewarding, including doses of high-grade heroin, to feed the habit he would supposedly help them break. One of his articles refers to a volunteer who felt that he would die or would become permanently insane after giving 180 micrograms of LSD, asked not to be dosed again, and required considerable persuasion. before agreeing to continue. I feel sure you'll be interested to learn what we were able to begin our experiments with LSD 25 during the months of July. Isabel wrote to Gottlieb soon after they met. We obtained 5 subjects who agreed to take the drug chronically. All of these were Negro male patients. A month later, Isbell provided an update. They had steadily increased the dosage of LSD he administered to the subjects up to 300 micrograms. The mental effect of LSD 25 was very striking, he told Gottlieb. They included anxiety, a feeling of unreality, feelings of electric shock on the skin, tingling sensations, choking, making changes in visual perception were reported. These included blurring of vision, abnormal coloration of familiar objects, hands turning purple, green, etc., flickering shadows, dance, dots of light, and spinning circles of color. Frequently, inanimate objects were distorted and changed in size. This did not add much to what Gottlieb already knew, but he was pleased to have secured a supply of expendables for research inside the United States. He visited Lexington several times to observe Isbell's experiments. Sometimes he brought Frank Olson or another of his colleagues. He recognized Isbell as a uniquely valuable collaborator. Later, it turned out that one of Isbell's victims was William Henry Wall, a physician and former state senator from Georgia who had become addicted to the painkiller Demerol after a dental procedure. In 1953, he was arrested on drug charges, convicted, and sentenced to a term at the Addiction Research Center. There he became the subject of Isabel's LSD experiments. They left him mentally crippled. For the rest of his life, he suffered from delusions, paranoia, panic attacks, and suicidal impulses. A book that his son later wrote about the case is entitled From Healing to Hell. What Harris Isbell did to my father was to assault him with a poison that potentially damaged his brain. The book says the CIA ill-conceived covert Cold War scheme to find a mind-controlled drug for use on hostile leaders had caught my father in its hateful web. One of Isbell's experiments may have been most extreme in the history of LSD research. Gottlieb wanted to test the effect of heavy doses over an extended period of time. Isabel selected 7 prisoners, isolated them, and began the experiment. I have 7 patients who have been taking the drug for 42 days, he wrote in one progressive report, adding that he was giving most of them double, triple, and quadruple doses. The experiment continued for 77 days. What can happen to a man's mind as he's locked in a cell and force-fed overdoses of LSD every day for so long? In a gruesome question to ponder, Gottlieb, however, hoped that he might find a point at which massive doses would finally dissolve the mind. It was the worst shit I ever had, recalled one subject in Isabel's LSD experiments, a 19-year-old African-American drug addict named Eddie Flowers. Flowers suffered through hours of overwhelming hallucinations because he wanted the dose of heroin that Isbell offered as payment. If you wanted it in the vein, you got it in the vein. Gottlieb appreciated prison doctors like Harris Isbell. They helped almost life or death power over helpless men, and as government employees, they were open to his overtures. He sent them LSD where they were fed to inmates who volunteered in exchange for favors like more comfortable cells, better prison jobs, or credit for good time. Afterwards, they wrote reports describing the inmates' responses. The most enthusiastic of these doctors, Carl Pfeiffer, chairman of the Department of Pharmacology at Emory University, ran 4 MKUltra subprojects. All involved the administration of LSD and other drugs to induce psychotic states in what Gottlieb called normal and schizophrenic human beings. Or was he trying to induce that into them? As subjects, Pfeiffer used inmates at the federal prison in Atlanta and at a juvenile detention center in Bordentown, New Jersey. Under subprojects 9 and 26, he studied ways that various depressant drugs can shake a person's psyche by either in altering his metabolism or producing sedation. His assignment under subproject 28 was to test depressants which affect the central nervous system. Most intriguingly, under subproject 47, he would screen and evaluate hallucinogenic materials of interest to technical services. One of his reports described epileptic-type seizures produced by chemicals. Another says that LSD produced a model psychosis. Hallucinations last for 3 days and are characterized by repeated waves of depersonalization, visual hallucinations, and feeling of an unreality. Gottlieb later said Pfeiffer worked had been an ultra-sensitive area that lent itself to easy misinterpretation and misunderstanding, but was worthwhile in the end. We learned a lot from the Atlanta experiments, Gottlieb concluded. The agency learned that a person's psyche could be very disturbed by those means. That conclusion is richly confirmed by the recollections of one of Pfeiffer's subjects, James Whitey Bulger. Here we go. Bulger, a Boston gangster who was later sentenced to life in prison for crimes including 11 murders. Bulger was a street-level thug in his mid-20s when he was sent to the Atlantic Federal Penitentiary after being convicted of armed robbery and truck hijacking. There he volunteered to participate in what he was told was a drug experiment aimed at finding a cure for schizophrenia. No, they were giving people schizophrenia. It's an inverted program. What followed is almost unimaginable. Along with 19 other inmates, he was given LSD nearly every day for 15 months. This is hard for me to read without being told what it was. 15 months. In a notebook that he wrote after being released, he described nightly nightmares and horrible LSD experiences, followed by thoughts of suicide and deep depression that would push me over the edge. He did not tell medical attendants about hearing voices or the seeming movement of calendar in cell, etc., for fear that if he did so, I'd be committed for life and never see the outside again. In one passage, he describes Pfeiffer as a modern-day Dr. Mengele. It is a trenchant comparison since the experiments that Mengele and other Nazi doctors conducted at concentration camps were lineal ancestors of MKUltra subprojects, like the one into which Bulger was drawn. I was in prison for committing a crime and feel they committed a worse crime on me, Bulger wrote. His description of the experience is a rare report on an MKUltra experiment from the subject's perspective. This is Whitey Bulger speaking now. In 1957, while a prisoner at the Atlantic Penitentiary, I was recruited by Dr. Carl Pfeiffer of Emory University to join a medical project that was researching a cure for schizophrenia. For our participation, we would receive 3 days of good time for each month on the project. We were injected with massive doses of LSD-25. In minutes, the drug would take over, and about 8 or 9 men, Dr. Pfeiffer and several men in suits who were not doctors, would give us tests to see how we reacted. 8 convicts in the panic and paranoid state, total loss of appetite. Hallucinating. The room would change shape. Hours of paranoia and feeling violent. We expected horrible periods of living nightmares and even blood coming out of the walls. Guys turned to skeletons in front of me. I saw a camera change into a head of a dog. I felt like I was going insane. The men in suits would be in the room and hook me up to machines, ask me questions like, "Did you ever kill anyone? Would you kill someone?" 2 men went psychotic. They all had symptoms of schizophrenia. They had to be pried loose from under their beds, growling, barking, and frothing at the mouth. They put them in strip cell down to the hall. I never saw or heard them again. They told us we were helping find a cure for schizophrenia. Sure they were. When it was all over, everyone could feel suicidal and depressed, wrung out emotionally. Time would stand still. I tried to quiet, but Dr. Pfeiffer would appeal to me. Please, you're my best subject. Would you? We are close to finding a cure. Begging Whitey Bulger to stay in their project. We pray for people who are wrongly convicted and accused of crimes in this country. Apparently, that's why there's no list or no drugs or no videos on nobody's trial. There was never drugs or videos in any trial ever in America. So we God bless all the family members, the vinyl community members, the crime family members, and all the children. Have a lovely day.